Good morning again, my dear students. Welcome to our subject, Government Accounting. Let us continue learning. And our topic for this day is all about revenues and other receipts. There are two learning objectives of this presentation. Number one, state the sources of revenue of a government entity, and state the recognition and measurement of revenue. Fundamental principles for revenue. All revenues shall be remitted to the Bureau of Treasury and included in the general fund unless another law specifically allows otherwise. Recording in other types of funds, example special funds, shall be made only when authorized by law. So kapag mag-work ka someday in a government, so sana alam po natin yung mga batas so that we can follow 100% po yung mga batas po. Kasi when you will disabide yung mga batas, may tendency po magbibigay ng memo si Commission and Audit once na tayo po ay nag-disabide po sa mga batas po. Receipts shall be properly acknowledged through pre-numbered ORs. Receipts can be in the form of checks po. So kapag tayo po ay nagre-release ng mga forms, dapat po in series po siya, by numbered po. So wag pong lagtaw-lagtaw po. Revenues may arise from exchange and non-exchange transactions. Exchange transaction, example, sale of goods and rendering of services. So, kung may ginawa ka, syempre may marireceive ka. That is an exchange transaction. Non-exchange transactions, examples, tax revenue, fines and penalties, and donations. Even though wala kang ginagawa po, may tendency na meron kang matatanggap po, like donations, guys. Sale of goods. Revenue from the sale of goods shall be recognized when all of the following conditions are satisfied. So all of the following, guys, naka-all po. So if one of the items po will be missing, then hindi po siya revenue, guys. Revenue from the sale of goods. Okay. So significant sale was a significant risk and the rewards of ownership of the goods are transferred to the buyer. The entity does not retain continuing managerial involvement or effective control over the goods or goods sold. Goods sold, okay? So yung control ay maililipat po sa buyer. It is probable that the economic benefits will flow to the entity. Revenue can be measured reliably and cost related to the transaction can be measured reliably. Rendering of services. Revenue from the rendering of services is recognized on a straight line basis over the contract term. However, revenue is recognized by reference to the stage of completion if the outcome of the transaction can be estimated reliably, such when all of the following conditions are satisfied. Number one, the stage of completion can be measured reliably. Number two, it is probable that economic benefits will flow to the entity. Number three, revenue can be measured reliably. And number four, costs relating to the transaction can be measured reliably. When the outcome cannot be estimated reliably, revenue is recognized only to the extent of recoverable cost po. So kung magkano ang cost, yun din po ang, yun yung sobra sa cost po. Minsan po yun po ang nare-record po nila as revenue. Okay? In terms of stage of completion, kung ilang porsyento na po ang kanilang natatapos po. Itong nasa ibaba naman po cannot estimated reliably po, so binibase nila based on the extent of recoverable cost, guys. Maybe napag-aralan niyo yan sa advanced accounting part 2 regarding sa long-term construction or projects po. Tama po ba, guys? Yung cost recovery method, like that. Interest, royalties, and dividends. Interest is recognized on a time proportion basis that takes into account the effective yield on the asset. Ayan. Proportionate. Ayan. Diba? I know you know how to compute for the interest, guys. Principal times rate times time. Royalties is recognized as they are earned in accordance with the substance of the relevant agreement. And dividends are recognized when the entity's right to receive payment is established po. So, kailan ulit magre-record, guys, ng liability? regarding the dividends po on the time of declaration po. Measurement of revenue from exchange transactions. Revenue from exchange transactions are measured at the fair value of the consideration received or receivable. So not on the time na binayaran po guys, but on the time na may na-render ka na guys. Any trade discounts and volume rebates shall be taken into account. When cash flows are deferred, the fair value of the consideration is the present value of the consideration receivable. So that will be the cost. Kasi yung ipapatong guys is an interest po. Exchanges of goods or services. Similar, no revenue is recognized. The similar revenue is recognized, measured using the following order of priority po. Fair value of the goods or services received adjusted by the amount of any cash transferred. Fair value of the goods or services given up adjusted by the amount of any cash transferred po. So itong transaction na ito guys, maybe napag-aralan nyo na rin guys sa ating financial accounting po. Tama po ba guys? Yes po. So same lang naman po ang standards na gagamitin po natin. Except for nasa government accounting po tayo. So by priority po tayo guys ha. Si A, kung wala si A po, si B po ang gagamitin natin po. In terms of the similar transactions guys. Non-exchange transactions. Revenue from non-exchange transactions are derived mostly from taxes, fines and penalties, gifts, donations, and goods in kind po. Tax revenue, income tax, earning of taxable income, taxable event. Ayan, so even though your salary is minimum at minimum po, mag-file ka rin, pa rin po ng form sa BIR guys. Value-added tax, undertaking of taxable activity. So it's up to you if gusto mo ng may value-added tax or wala guys, di ba? So syempre hindi ka bibili ng may VAT if ayaw mo pong magkaroon ng tax, di ba? There are two ways, di ba? Nakalagay po doon. If you want to be non-taxable if or taxable po. Tama po ba regarding the avoidance of tax? Tama po ba guys? Yes po. Yan, related sa taxation nating subject guys. Goods and services tax, purchases, what's that? Purchase or sale of taxable goods or services. Customs duty, movement of dutiable goods or services across the customs boundary. Ayan, so may mga taxes po yung mga binebenta po ng ibang bansa na papasok po dito sa ating bansa guys. Death duty, death of the owner of the taxable property regarding maybe transfer tax, tama po ba? Property tax, possible of time period for which the tax is levied. So even though tayo po ang nagmamayari ng lupa, like that, we need still to pay kasi nga po ang ating mga ararian ay nasa jurisdiction po ng bansang ito, ng ating bansa po. If you want to live here, then we need also to pay the taxes po. It's the right of the country po because the taxes po are the one what I mean, the taxes po are the lifeblood of the government po. Without this, syempre hindi po gagana po ang gobyerno po. Tama po ba guys? Yes po, tama po. Gifts, donations, and goods in kind recognized as revenue measured at fair value when it is probable that the future economic benefits will flow to the entity. If without condition, recognized immediately as revenue. Kung wala na daw pong gagawin, binigay lang, so you will recognize that as revenue. If meron pang gagawin po, so you need first to recognize as liability. If nagawa na po, then that is the time that you will recognize that as revenue. Other services in kind not recognized as revenue. Debt forgiveness, carrying amount of debt forgiven is recognized as revenue. Bequest po, transfers made according to the provisions of a deceased person's will, recognized as revenue measured at fair value if asset recognition criteria are met po. For example, lupa po yan, so you need to recognize that at fair value. Grant with condition, initially recognized as liability until condition is satisfied. Pledges, not recognized as revenue. Concessionary loans, anong nakalagay po dito guys? Difference between fair value and transaction price is recognized as revenue if non-exchange transactions po. Ayan. So I hope nakuha po natin on how do we recognize if that is a revenue or not before you will recognize that as a revenue. Impairment losses and allowances for impairment losses. When an amount already recognized as a revenue becomes uncollectible. So you need to expense that already, guys. You need to build na po allowance for impairment like that or allowance for bad debts sa mga utang, guys, if may possibility na hindi na po masisingil. In the government, we need to establish kasi meron po siyang standard na sinusundan po so that the asset will not be overstated po. So iba rin po yung mga what do you call this one again po? Percentages na ginagamit, guys, sa government. May fix na po. Okay? So sana sundan po natin. Ang ginagamit po na method in the allowances is the aging method. It is recognized as expense rather than as an adjustment to the revenue originally recognized. Other seats, subsidy from the NG and other national government agencies, recognized as revenue from assistance and subsidy. Receipts from excess cash advance, overpayment of expenses, performance bonds and security deposits, collections on behalf of of other entities, and inter or intra-agency fund transfers. Not recognized as revenue, guys. Kasi dapat mo naman talagang ibalik po ang excess cash advance payment po na binigay sa iyo kasi hindi naman sa iyo talaga 'yon, ibalik mo sa pondo ng government po. Overpayment of expenses, syempre i-disallow po 'yan if kinuha mo, ibabalik mo, guys. Performance bonds and security deposits, guys. So yan isa sa uli po once na nakuha na po or nagawa na po yung mga dapat gawin, guys. Collections on behalf of the other entities. Maybe napag-aralan po natin ang what's that again? Solution indemnity and negotiatorium gesteo po sa obligation of contract. Tama ba? Obligation of contracts. Tama ba? Ayan. So, I hope tama naman. Ayan. Inter or intra-agency fund transfers po. Ayan. Wala naman pong kita po dyan kasi fund na galing din po sa ibang ahensya po or sa loob ng ahensya mismo, guys. So, I hope you've learned something about our lesson for this day po. Any comment, any inquiry regarding our discussion, you just comment down so that I can read and I can answer, guys. Ayan. Again, after that, I will give you the activities po that you need to answer for me to assess also if may natutunan po tayo or wala po, guys. So that ends our lesson for this day. Thank you again and God bless.